I think now in today's day and age of media and podcasts and coaches making appearances in different platforms, I think we'll see a lot different sides in different arenas that we do from college football coaches that we saw before. Like the access before was game day, sideline interviews, press conferences. And like you look at those arenas, like it's sometimes not the most comfortable setting for coaches exactly to open up. Take it from someone who was a reporter in a previous version of my career, that had been in Division I college football press conferences, that have been in, professional press conferences. It is a very structured type of environment, and it maybe doesn't suit the personality of some of these guys as well. Like you watch Dan Lanning in a press conference. He's short with a lot of the media. He's very tight-lipped. I think with a lot of the media, and that, like, if you just watch that in a tunnel, you might form a certain opinion of what Dan is. But then you see him appear on Bussin with the boys, and you see a completely different side of Dan Lanning. And I love to see this side of Dan, because Dan just seems like a guy that you would just love to just have a beer with and just talk ball. Like, he is just smiling. Like, look at this picture. He is straight cheesing. If you're watching this on YouTube, he is straight cheesing in this interview, sitting across from Will Compton and Taylor Lewan. So you love to see this side of Dan and this personable side. Certainly, like, there's questions that Will and Taylor asked that traditional media asked. Like, traditional media asked these questions about, like, 12 man on the field against Ohio State, about the Rose Bowl loss to Ohio State, and you got fairly structured, maybe dancing around the question a little bit. With the traditional media, with Taylor and Will, he was completely open and completely different answer on a variety of topics as well. So I think for fans, it gives us a little bit of an inside look and a little bit more of an open look of the head coach of this Oregon Ducks football program. So I loved every minute of this interview. I watched the whole thing. It was awesome. And I'm going to give kind of some takeaways and some things that really stood out to me in this interview. First of all, Dan and Ducks, they love the boys. They love the boys. They love Will Compton. They love Taylor Lewan. They love broing out. Look, it's not my thing. It's not my type of personality. But like Will and Taylor, I think connect a lot with the players. Taylor Lewan, I think, recently retired from the NFL. Will Compton had a career that was, I think, fairly recent as well. Like, you have guys, I think, kind of just the way they are and the way college kids are, I think they can kind of relate to that as well, and they get excited, they get interested. Like Dan said on this podcast, it said, there was a different buzz around practice when Will and Taylor were certainly both there as well. So having Dan, the boys, and the Ducks all kind of be there, feeding off of each other, I think was great. Like Taylor talked about the culture specifically of the offensive line. He was in the offensive line room. The culture was great surrounding this Oregon football program, which of course you love to see. And it allows, like, these guys have a big platform. So they can take what they saw in Eugene and they can kind of spread it to the masses. And I think that kind of relates to a little bit of the younger generation, and it gets that kind of reputation out there, certainly a little bit more of the positives that surround this Oregon Ducks football program. Second point that I have here, Dan is the perfect style of coach for modern college football. He has the perfect approach within modern college football. Here's a soundbite that I'm talking about that really backs up my point.
How many snaps am I going to play for Oregon next year? Zero. It doesn't matter what I know. It's about what your players know and what they can execute. So, there's a lot of negatives that surround what people talk about, like the portal and how that exists. The truth is the portal is revealing a lot of character of programs, right? And here you have a relationship with your coach. There's connection. You feel like you can talk to this guy about stuff beyond football, right? And I think that relationship is really important. It's not coach-player, right? It's coach-player. And that's the guy that has to go execute. That means he has to love the guy that he's playing for. He's got to believe in what we're doing. How do you create belief? Guys want to know the why today, right? 20 years ago, we would have ran through any wall, whatever the coach said, and I'm not trying to run gassers after practice because I did it wrong. Now it's not about like establishing fear. It's about just establishing a true relationship of this guy's making me better. He's making me improve. Something I learned early as a coach is that every player is different, right? I've been around coaches before who says, I'm going to coach you all the same. Like the reality is you're not getting the best out of the player if you coach everybody the same. So for me, I feel like this world has kind of revealed character, not necessarily the other way around. And for me, I've always coached the guys different. I'd coach Bo Nix a little bit different than Dylan Gabriel, right? I'd coach Tez Johnson a little bit different than Trayshawn Holden. I just think that's how you get the best out of people, right? Some guys you can confront right there in front of them on the field, and we certainly do that, right? Those are the fun ones, right? And then some guys you got to put your arm around them, and it looks a little bit different. I don't think it's changed the way that we coach here. I think it's heightened the awareness of being prepared for the next moment. Like, what could happen if this doesn't go right? A guy had a bad day on the practice field. Okay, what's your reaction as a coach? And trying to be proactive rather than reactive in those moments.
You listen to that soundbite from the podcast, and it just seems so obvious. The way he kind of lays out, hey, you need to have a relationship with your position coach, with your coordinator, with your head coach, and we need to be able to really do what suits you to be able to get you at the highest level of football. Because if you have a guy that does not respond to like an intimidation factor to really getting on a guy in practice, and like Dan said, you kind of got to put your arm around him. Like, you're not going to just yell at him constantly, because you're not going to get the most out of that. Like, when I played high school football in the state of Wisconsin, like, I played for a coach that was very much intimidation factor. He coached everybody the same way. It was his way, or it was the highway. And I did not respond well to that. So I was not able to maybe be as good as I possibly could be. But today's day and age of college football is very different. You cannot, like the Sabans of the world, and especially like the Urban Meyers of the world, when these players, when they weren't getting paid, I think you could have more of these, like, if you want to say disciplinarians, or these like almost like God level college football coaches, especially the ones that did so much winning, like the ones that I just mentioned here before. Now, where you got a player that's making $1 million, you got a player that's making $1.5 million, all of a sudden you can't talk down to them as much as you previously could. I think NIL has really changed the approach, and I think it's a generation of players, maybe a little bit as well, where you got to meet them somewhere in the middle, like Dan certainly said. You got to approach this as a relationship, right? As a mutual relationship, instead of, hey, I'm up here and you're down here, and you got to be able to listen to me. I remember Dan in a recent press conference talking about, hey, the 105 roster limit and all of the changes within college football. He's like, hey, doesn't matter. We got to continue to evolve. Whatever the rules are, we know it's going to be changing, and we got to continue to adapt. And I think his coaching style and his coaching approach and his relations, like you hear everybody say when you talk about recruiting, Dan Lanning is great when it comes to forming relationships on the recruiting trail, when it comes to forming relationships with high school coaches, when it comes to forming relationships with parents, when it comes to forming relationships with players. So it should be no surprise that he has been able to master this as well. So I thought that was very telling, and that answer during his interview certainly as well. Coaches are not on the pedestal that they used to be. And you can see somebody like this interview was a perfect example of, like, Dan Lanning he's a very personable guy. And I think he's very easy to be able to get along with. So I think that certainly all ties together as well. Another point that I took away from this podcast was Lanning knows in a couple of different ways that Oregon is a destination program.
Time you're traveling, what built up? The anticipation. The whole time you're sitting here saying, how good is this about to be? And you get here, how's it been?
It has been incredible.
Elite. It's elite. And I always talk to guys in recruiting. It's really simple. Am I picking best, or am I picking most convenient? Right? If it's about most convenient, right? I'm from Missouri. You're from Missouri. You would have been to Southeast Missouri, right? Like, it's not about most convenient, right? You would have been over there at Arizona State. Who knows what it would have looked like? It's about picking best. And what Oregon provides is one of the best opportunities in the nation to get developed, get recruited, be a part of a program that's unbelievable. And that's what we look for. It's not about the easiest. It's about the one that makes the most sense. And I do feel like this age group is like the group that I connect with unbelievably. And then more than that, like, I always think back to, it seems like everybody's always thinking about what's next. And for me, like, I'm more of the thank you. Like, I get to do this here. Like, I can't imagine going to do this somewhere else because of the opportunity that Oregon's given me. And then so often everybody's like, well, I can go do this somewhere. Like, I want to do it here. I want to make it happen here because they believed in me, right? It wasn't like I was a head coach coming from somewhere else. Here I was a D coordinator and hadn't been a head coach, right? I coached a third grade basketball team in high school, right? Like, so they gave me an opportunity, like, why not do it here? I promised my kids, like, when we came here, like, you're going to get to graduate from the same middle school, the same high school. Like, my kids have lived in 8 states. Yeah. Right? That's crazy. Man, so like now,
military lifestyle.
So for me, it's like, it's not even a thought. Like as long as we win, because if I don't hold up that part, I won't be here.
Yeah.
Right? As long as we win, like I can't see myself anywhere else.
Dan laid out some really good points there as it pertains to the destination that is Eugene, not only for recruiting players, but where he stands as a current head coach. Like, let's talk about it first from the player perspective. We know, like, I always kind of reference back to this every so often, a video that I did on the Big Ten TED channel that talks about how I thought Oregon was the coolest program in college football. Like, we know about the resources. We know they've always had top-tier facilities. We know, hey, that they've got Oregon has great fans. We know about Nike. We know about the jerseys. Like, we know about all of these things. And you package it up in the Pacific Northwest, and you put the mountains in the background, and like just like we hear it all the time in recruiting. Hey, we just got to get them on a visit. We just got to show them how Oregon is different. Like that, you hear a lot from people. Man, Oregon, it's just different. I'm looking forward personally to going to Eugene, to going to different parts of Oregon, and just seeing what it's all about this summer as well. And then you look at it from a coach perspective. Like, Dan has done a fantastic job at leveraging all the resources. So we talk about it in terms of attractiveness for players, how it's a destination for some of these players. And once they see everything, it's like, wow, yeah, of course I want to come here. But then you look at it from Dan, like there's been like, of course the Alabama job came open, and maybe in the future there's going to be some other jobs that are come open. Like, where else would you go? Like, if you give the coldest of shoulders to a school like Alabama, and you don't even give that the time of day, where else are you going to go? Oregon, Dan has done a great job at leveraging all of the resources available, better than probably any coach that Oregon has had in their history. Like, we're only in we're going in year 4, I think, with Dan and what he's been able to do, how far he's been able to take what Oregon has and then take his skill set, combine it, and certainly take it to the next level. It's very clear that for himself and his family, this is a destination. Okay, he said he has during this podcast, he has an ultimate pursuit of the ring to win a championship. He's an ultra motivated guy, certainly, and he realizes how much of a destination Eugene, Oregon certainly is in the college football world. Let's talk about motivation a little bit right now. I preface this segment by saying, hey, Dan doesn't really open up that much to traditional media. He was asked about, I think, his first media availability this spring about the Ohio State loss, and he's like, it's a new season. It's behind us. It's all of that as well. But then, now he has this interview with Will and with Taylor, and he opened up a lot more. He opened up a lot more, talking about the medicine that comes through with the motivation from a loss like that Rose Bowl loss on January 1st.
The easy thing in those moments, especially afterwards, is like, let me make excuses of why, right? But if you're a growth mindset guy, right? If you're wired like we are here, to me, it's like, how do I make sure this doesn't happen again, right? You got to learn from that moment. If you're motivated the right way, those moments, those are growth moments. That's a chance to say, okay, I'm going to go improve.
Yeah. Did that medicine last a little bit longer? Just knowing
that medicine, I wake up every night about that medicine. Like, before we struggled early on beating Washington when I first started here. And we were able to get over that hump, right? We were able to beat them this past season. Right now, I wake up thinking about that Rose Bowl game and didn't do it the way I wanted to do it. So it motivates me.
It's interesting how he brings up the whole Washington deal where they lost 3 consecutive times to Washington. And that was the hurdle that needed to be climbed, right? And I've talked about this before, of how this program continues to grow and continues to really take steps up the ladder. Okay, they losing to Oregon State that first year and then losing to Washington, and they really conquered that and really showed the direction that they're taking as opposed to their rivals. And now Ohio State is really sitting there, and that Rose Bowl is now sitting there as the next level of motivation. Okay, we've all seen Ducks versus them. We've seen how Dan Lanning, whether it's with his words, he can really be a wordsmith with really some things right now, or however he does it. But he is an extremely great coach when it comes to motivating his players and really getting the most out of them in terms of that respect. And I said this all the way back in January, that Dan is going to use this as a motivational factor, not only for himself, and you heard what he said in that clip in terms of how this loss keeps him up at night, how this loss continues to motivate him certainly going forward, but it's not only he's going to be able to take that and what he thinks about, and he's going to be able to translate that certainly to his players, so he continues to take that next step up. And it's all about the continued growth. Dan Lanning is yet to be 40 years old, and I've talked about this before. Dan Lanning is learning, and he's growing at an elite level. Some people learn and grow when they're going 7-5 at Toledo. Dan is learning and growing when he's going 13-1, winning a Big Ten championship. All right? Like, these are the obstacles, and Dan is still, like, kind of figuring, I think, some things out. I think that's very clear, but, man, I think this motivation from how this last season ended is going to continue to take this team certainly up the ladder. I loved seeing him open up. I love seeing this side of Dan Lanning in this podcast with Bussin' with the boys. So more of Will, more of Taylor, I think equals more of the Dan Lanning that we certainly like to see, and him opening up a little bit more on some of these topics surrounding Oregon football.